We are beginning a study of the book of Exodus called the second book of Moses. However, the authorship is unclear that Moses is the actual author. However, archaeological discoveries have given scholars of all persuasions and background a high respect for the historicity of the events that are described in this book. The name Exodus, of course, is related to our word exit, and it is a departure. And we are given the name of that book because it was used by those who translated out of the Hebrew into Greek those 70 books called the Septuagint, and then the Septuagint translated into the Latin Vulgate and, of course, the Latin Bible in 1611, translated into the King James Version, and that word Exodus stood, although less than half of the book is about the actual departure. The original Hebrew word means the names, these are the names. Exodus chapter 1, verse 1. Now these are the names of the children of Israel which came into Egypt. Every man and his household came with Jacob. 2. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. These are the children of Leah, of the two handmaidens, one belonging to Rachel, one belonging to Leah, and of course Rachel herself, the mother of Benjamin and Joseph. And 70 is a multiple of the number 7, meaning complete in biblical numerics, and 70 is also the number of one of the numbers of a generation, being 40, 70, or 120. All three are used for a generation. You want to wonder that it is said they were in Egypt 430 years, and they traveled up, of course, leaving the little children and maybe the elderly to take Jacob for burial. And we wonder, well, why didn't they leave? They prospered in Egypt, and they came in when Joseph came in and when Jacob came in, and when they were in favor, it was during the rulership of the Hyksos, Hyksos. These were Semitic people living in the northern part of Egypt, or what is called Lower Egypt, and Josephus calls them the shepherd kings, and they did rule until from about 17 BC to maybe 1470 or so, and were eventually driven out by the pocket of natural Egyptians who were of the ruling class to the south. And when that happened, they were out of power. And back in Genesis, we learned that toward the end of the famine, which brought Jacob's family into Egypt in the first place, that Pharaoh commanded Joseph to take the flocks of the people, and the Bible says the Egyptians and the Canaanites, and of course Jacob's family were out of Canaan. And then they couldn't buy food again, and Pharaoh took their land, and they said, we just have land and labor, and they only had labor then, and they became what we would call sharecroppers, They got 4/5 of the crop, and Pharaoh got 1/5. Now, it's unclear that whether the Israelites were considered part of the Canaanites who came under that feudal system or not. Scott, we do know that the priests were exempt from being under this tenant farming agreement, but it is not totally clear that the Israelites were exempt or not. Some scholars say that they were not part of this, but we don't have a really clear if they were so prosperous and had flourished so, why they didn't go home. Certainly, in Genesis, on his deathbed, Jacob tells them that they will indeed get to the land that God had promised Abraham, and Joseph says the very same thing on his deathbed. And the number 430 is usually given as the number of years that the Israelites, the family of Jacob, were in Egypt. 6. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. That those 12 of the tribe, the sons of Jacob. 7. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now, 8. There arose a new king over Egypt which knew not Joseph. That would have been the start of the Ramses dynasty. 9. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on. 10. And let us deal wisely or diplomatically with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also with our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. So Pharaoh is concerned about their numbers and the fact that they could side with invaders who would likely arrive from the north into Lower Egypt, which is where they were concentrated, the Israelites. 11. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. So they were given persons to look over their labors. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. And those cities were built during the reign of Ramses the Great. 12. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. They multiplied and were fruitful because God was with them, and it did grieve the Egyptians because they were becoming so populous that a takeover would have been easy. 13. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. And that word rigor means crushing kind of overseeing their labor to beat them down. 14. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, in mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor, hard work. A great deal of building. They were making bricks for Pharaoh, and that 18th dynasty of Egyptian Pharaoh rule is considered one of the brilliant periods in their history. and of course conditions for the Hebrews deteriorated. 15. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Shiphrah, and that means brightness, and the name of the other Puah, and that means splendid. These were Hebrew midwives who were helping in the delivery of children. And he said, when you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him, but if it be a daughter, then she shall live. So they would allow the daughters to live because they could be assimilated into the society. Now, when you see them upon the stools, those were, that word is stones. It was 2 stones that the women either sat on, birthing stools, or knelt on to deliver a child. 17. But the midwives feared God because they were of God's people, and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. 18. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, why have you done this thing and have saved the men children alive? 19. And the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered ere the midwives come in to them. Said, they're so healthy that the baby has already been born. Before we ever get there, they don't need our help as the Egyptian women do. 20. Therefore God dwelt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. 21. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. They were taken care of because they feared, and that word should be translated revered. In other words, they held God in awesome, loving relationship. 22. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. Now the river Nile was a dangerous place. For one thing, it was full of crocodiles, and the crocodiles would have devoured infants. Chapter 2. And there went a man out of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi. Now Levi is the priest line, and a priest in the New Testament and all the way through when we get into the law, the Levites were priests, and in order to serve, their wives had to also come through the house of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son, and when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And this would have been the 7th generation from Abraham. A goodly child, a healthy, vigorous child. 3. And when she could not longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes, and dabbed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein, and laid it in the flags by the river's brink. Now that rushes, those bulrushes, would have been papyrus. Those were reeds that were used in paper making. The scrolls were written on that paper, and that slime and pitch mixed, that would have been something like our modern day asphalt. And she put the child in, and the flags, of course, were reeds by the river's edge on the brink. 4. And his sister stood afar off, to wit, what would be done to him. So he was not just abandoned in the river in this little boat that they fashioned, but it was being watched. And as we will see, the place where he was put in this little boat was very carefully thought out. 5. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself in the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. Now, her bathing was not simply hygienic, it would have been some kind of a religious ritual. And the Egyptians had 29 main gods and over 2,000 minor gods. 6. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, This is one of the Hebrews' children. And Hebrews, that word Hebrew means those who cross the river. 7. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? This is Miriam, the sister of Moses. 8. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, Go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. God is in control. 9. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, Take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. Now, this is Pharaoh's daughter. And who is paying for it to be nursed? Pharaoh himself. He is sustaining the very person who will deliver his people out of the bondage of Pharaoh. 10. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she called his name Moses. And she said, Because I drew him out of the water. And Moses means drawn from water. 11. And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens, and spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. 12. And he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. So he looked about to make sure that there were no observers, and he killed this Egyptian and put his body in the sand. 13. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together. They were fighting. And he said to him that did the wrong, Wherefore smitest thy fellow? 14. He said, Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killedst the Egyptians? And Moses feared and said, Surely this thing is known. If one of the Hebrews saw him kill that Egyptian, then he is very afraid that he has been observed by others, and of course his life would have been in jeopardy. 15. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well. And Midian means strife. And if you remember from the Genesis study, Midian is an offspring of Abraham and his second wife Keturah. And Abraham sent them forth. They were not to be inheritors of the promise, and the Midianites were those offspring, and they were nomadic people, and they lived up and down the African coast. And in fact, they were in Ethiopia. We will learn later. It does not mean they were Ethiopians. They were living in Ethiopia. And remember that they were Midianites. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the trough to water their father's flock. Now if he was a priest, his wife would have also been a Midianite, offspring of Keturah and Abraham, Semitic people. And 17. And the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. Now those shepherds, that translates to Kenites, these were offspring of Cain, who drove them away. 18. And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, How is it that ye are come so soon today? Now he's called Reuel here, but he will be called Jethro in a later verse. One and the same person, and we're unsure why. It means a friend of God, why he had 2 names. 19. And they said, An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock. So they've taken Moses to be an Egyptian, certainly because of his dress. He lived in the royal house and was considered the son of Pharaoh's daughter, and he would not have been dressed in the manner of the Israelites. 20. And he said unto his daughters, And where is he? And why is it that ye have left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread. 21. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses Zipporah, his daughter, and that means Zipporah, little bird of God. Now later on, you are going to hear that Miriam and Aaron were angry with Moses, because he married an Ethiopian. And I've just now explained to you that they lived in Ethiopia. She was a full-blood Midianite, a descendant of Abraham and of Keturah. And persons who will teach you that Moses married a woman of the black race are wrong. Not that would be a thing wrong with his having married a woman of the black race. This person happened to be a Semitic person. 22. And she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom. And for he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. And that name, Gershom, means not his land. So Moses is aware that Egypt is indeed a strange land. Chapter 3. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, and that is the same as Reuel, he was called earlier, and the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even into Horeb in that Sinai, mountain of God. 2. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush, and he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. The angel of the Lord, of course, is God himself, and God is a consuming fire. But the miraculous occurrence here is that the bush was on fire, but it was not being consumed. 3. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. 4. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush, and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. 5. And he said, God speaking, Draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. 6. Moreover, he said, I am, not am I, but I am God thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. Remember, I am. 7. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of thy people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. So God is telling Moses, I am well aware of my people and how they are being treated in Egypt. 8. And I am come down to deliver them out of the land of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land unto a good land, and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And these are tribes of pagan people that these Israelites will come against when they are indeed in the promised land. And the Jebusites were held what would be Jerusalem. 9. And now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come unto me, and I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppress them. 10. Come now therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, and thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. 11. And Moses said unto God, Who am I, that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? In other words, he is saying, why me? What do I have that would give me this job? 12. God speaking. And he said, Certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God upon this mountain. And it will be true. 13. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers hath sent me unto you, and they say unto me, What is his name? What shall I say? 14. And God said unto Moses, I am that I am, the sacred name. That name is locked in 5 times in the book of Esther, by the way. And he said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am, YHVH, Yahweh, hath sent me unto you. Ea, Asher, Ea, I in the Hebrew. I am that I am. 15. And God said moreover unto Moses, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, hath sent me unto you. This is my name forever. This is my memorial unto all generations. Ea, Asher, Ea, I am that I am. No beginning and no end. 16. Go and gather the elders of Israel together, and say unto them, The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, appeared unto me, saying, I have surely visited you and seen that which is done unto you. Please join me for the next lesson in Exodus, beginning with chapter 3, verse 17. This video is an outreach of the Essex United Methodist Church in Essex, Missouri. Thank you.